Hi, this is Jeff Rails back with Paso's Education Alliance. Today we are going to talk with Caitlin Vierra, who is one of 12 candidates who is running for the Paso Robles Joint Unified School District Board of Trustees. Caitlin, thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. Why don't you just start with telling us a little bit about yourself?
My name is Caitlin Vierra. I am a parent. We have 3 kids. One's currently distance learning. We have 2 toddlers. My husband and I live here in Paso, obviously. I work locally as a manufacturing quality manager. I have an engineering degree, and I am running for the school board because I see that I can fit a need here in the district and provide a skill set to serve the community.
Great. So let's talk. Something I noticed in your statement was you used the line about evaluating programs. I think going into your background as an engineer, and you're looking for successes, you're looking at the procedures, and what are the results driven successes. But you had mentioned programs with little success, and do you have examples of programs that you're seeing in the district that maybe we don't feel like we're getting the return on, or is it more of a general construct you're talking about?
You know, there are a lot of programs going on in the district right now, and I don't have without being in the board, I don't have the examples specifically of, the history of our programs and how they've been doing over time. But it's clear from the metrics board that California has been publishing now for a while on how we're doing, that there's some gaps that we've got. And we really need to evaluate our programs based on how our students are performing and what our goals are as a district. Looking at our LCAP, we have a lot of goals in mind for where our priorities should be. And we need to really prioritize what our goals are as a district and give some real priority to those. Because if you have 30 priority goals, it's hard to tell what's really a priority. If you have 30 things that you're working on all at once, which ones really are your top priorities? So address those. Are those performing well? If those are performing well, go to your next ones. If they're not, address, is that really where your money should be going? And if it is, figure out how you can better utilize the money to get to where you need to be, right? So, that's one way to do that. The other thing is, in each individual project that you're looking at, you really need to know, how do you gauge success? Because sometimes your success metrics are a little bit gray, right? You don't really know, but you know that you're making forward progress. But it's a lot better if you can give a hard metric on what success is early on, before you start spending the money, so that later on that it really is doing what you intended to do from the start. It makes it much easier later when you're making budgetary decisions, if that project is worth it. It takes out the emotion when you get to the table and have to say, we've got to make cuts. Where do we make those cuts? You cut the things that aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, right?
Right.
As for examples right now of what we should be cutting, I don't know. We're going to have to get in there and start evaluating what really isn't working and what isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing. And I don't have the financial details of what specifically is going on in the district to be able to say that right now. But I assure you, it's one of the first things I'll be doing if I get this role.
Great. And kind of along those same lines is this process we are currently in about trying to figure out how to reopen our schools and get the kids back in. The district just passed I'll call it a roadmap, because it needs to be flexible, about our kids going back. Some kids even at the younger kids at the end of the month, and then kind of phasing it in where the older kids wouldn't be back into school until 2021. Do you have any thoughts on that program? Do you feel like they're being overly ambitious, overly cautious?
I think everyone wants the students back in school. There's different opinions on if the safety metrics are good enough, not good enough. There's a lot of thoughts and opinions, and even the the teacher surveys that went out were sort of split. Half the teachers felt like we needed a lot more. Half the teachers felt like we needed to stay in distance, and they needed to go back to school. It was really kind of a mixed bag on what we should do to get our students back. I mean, I think that we need to err on the side of caution with safety, because the worst thing we can do to everyone involved is put our students back in school and immediately start quarantining huge groups back at home for 2 weeks and flip them back and forth and back and forth. That's so disruptive to teachers, students, administrators, families, everyone, right? I wish that we had detailed planning on how to handle students in really small cohorts and keeping them separate, because the smaller the groups we have, the less likely we are to have to quarantine large populations. Um, you know, they've done studies, and if you can keep your students in actual small pods of groups on campus and not mix them, so they eat together, they recess together, and they learn together. If you have an instance of illness, only that group has to go home. And that would be my pitch, right? And you have to schedule very detailed for that. And they have sort of that going on, but I'm not sure that and I know right now the high school students aren't even scheduled to have a return to school date yet, right? So they haven't even been able to figure out how to do that with the resources we've got. So we've got some more planning to do still. And I would love to see us with real dates for when we can get our students back as soon as possible. I think it's doable. We just really need to sit down and schedule how to handle this in a way that our students are still safe, right? It's going to take a new way of thinking about education, though. It's not going to be what we used to do in today's pandemic world. That's not going to work.
Right. And you have a young student in elementary school, is that correct? And I have a fourth grader. And one of the things that's part of the plan is they're expecting the students to wear masks all day. My son is old enough where I think he will generally comply. I don't know how old your child is, but do you feel that it's realistic that to expect some cases 4-year-old to 4, 5, 6-year-old that they're going to wear a mask all day? Is that a game changer, I guess?
Our distance learner's in 4th grade, and she's old enough to be able to understand what is going on and to wear a mask. I have a 3-year-old who, as soon as we get anywhere, it's directly onto the floor.
Right.
Not every student is emotionally in a position where they can wear a mask. Nor should they be wearing a mask if they're out at recess. It's just not reasonable. And we have students who have asthma and other conditions that don't allow them to wear masks safely. That's why I really am a proponent for cohorts, right? And if you do your wellness checks and you're in a group and you don't mix, you really reduce your risk of cross-contaminating your groups. And you can get more creative with your safety if you can start thinking more out of the box for how to handle returning to school. Yeah.
So to turn to something a little more positive, one of the things that I know kept me involved and excited about school was extracurricular activities. And so whether it's clubs, the arts, different engineering programs, in our case, we have the CTE based stuff, and I'm blanking on the name of it right now. But we have so many different programs that are out there. And as a parent and someone who's been involved with this for a while, it's like when we get into tight times, those are necessarily, in a lot of ways, the first things that get cut. That and support staff. So how do you see the value of those extracurricular activities And what do you feel like the district and the community can do to maybe help support those so they're not so subject to the budget?
I think what happens is I don't think that the board or the decision makers really understand the value of those things because students and parents they utilize those programs, but they don't really share how much they mean to their students, right? It just sort of becomes a way of life. I think it's really important to continue to let the teachers and administrators know that those programs are important throughout the year as they're in them. Make sure that they remain a focus, right? I really value those types of extracurriculars. It's really important for wellness, right? For wellness for students, for parents, it's community, it's when they're happening outside of school hours, it provides a sort of community focus. You meet other parents, students meet each other, sort of not necessarily in their class, but other people in their grades or adjacent grades, and they build friendships, and that's very good for student wellness. It's very important to maintain that, particularly in tight budgets, because that is what you sort of grow up with those students as you progress through the grades, and it becomes sort of your lifelong network if you stay in the area. And if not, with social media, you stay connected to those people forever. My husband has lived in the Paso area most of his life, and he's still connected with all the people he plays sports with. So those relationships stay with you, and it builds a sort of network for you forever. It's very critical that those sorts of programs stay, and they tend to be the first ones cut, but that's not really fair to them because they're so important to students' identities, right? And it's not just education, it's wellness, and it builds your value system and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and as a side note, what I meant to say was the Skills USA program. My apologies to Randy Kennedy for not remembering that. So one of the things that's also happening at the district is we have a 7-Eleven committee that is in place and looking at what to do with some excess properties, and potentially even looking at closing down an elementary school campus, and which one, but do you have thoughts on that? I mean, I know we're in the information gathering phase, but just as closing down an elementary school would change the community, especially when you look at what the most viable candidates due to age are. Do you have thoughts on that? Is it, where are you at on that with what you understand so far?
I have to actually thank a community member for asking me this question 2 weeks ago, because I knew about the utilization of extra space and closing down, but I didn't really know about the committee. So I got to research this a bit. I like that the district is using a committee to gain information, and that they've tried to do a sort of committee that covers a population of our community to try and get input. Ultimately, it'll be the district's decision on taking in that input. But I really am an advocate for small class size and low student to teacher ratios. I don't like the idea of having to close an elementary school at all. Our elementary aged learners, it's a critical time to develop and close learning gaps. And so, if we have to close an elementary school and we don't have the declining enrollment that we project, and we end up having to put more students in classes and increase class size, it's going to be detrimental to my goal of scholastic success. So I would really hope that we can find alternative ways to close some budget gaps rather than shutting down a school. If we can utilize some of the other spaces in more unique ways, that would definitely be more of a priority for me. I don't know what that really looks like budget wise, but closing an elementary school is not on the top of my list at all.
Right. So kind of tangent to that. is the County Board of Education just approved Almond Acres Charter Academy to be able to open up within the boundaries of the Pasco School District, just right there, not too far from the high school itself. Do you have, if you want to go into general thoughts about charter schools, but do you consider this to be a challenge that the district's going to have to face, and how do we deal with that?
So I think that parents should have choices, right? So, I'm an advocate for education in general. So, having the charter school in our district it's not that far from where it was. I don't think we were in any more risk of having the charter school expand on the outskirts of San Miguel near our district, 5 miles away. Paso parents were going to take their charter school students to San Miguel. If they were going to choose a charter school, they were going to go there or here. I think having the charter school here is good for us actually, because it's going to provide some accountability for us to improve our academic performance, and try and gain back those students that we may lose. I do think it is going to be a challenge for us. The charter school is smaller; they can operate somewhat independently, and they are more agile because they can make quick decisions and alter their course. They don't have the current diversity that our district has, which may be a downside to some Paso parents. They are trying to mitigate that, so we'll see if they do, in fact, meet that challenge that they have. But as an advocate for education in general, I'd be lying if I say that I didn't want them here, because I do want our parents, and I say our as a community, to have choices in education. From the Paso district side, it will potentially add to our declining enrollment, but we had projected declining enrollment with or without Almond Acres. And so we need to address that as a holistic issue, not just because Almond Acres is headed this way.
Okay. And one of the things that's also out there is, we had substantial funding. We passed a very substantial bond to kind of address some of our infrastructure needs. And as part of that is the aquatic complex, which at best right now is, at least as planned, is about 50% funded by the fund. There has been some private funds raised as well. Where are you standing on it? Do you feel that if the money if we're able to save money on, let's say, the improvements on the other campuses, are you in favor of allocating an additional $5-6 million to build the Aquatic Center? Do you feel like that was better spent on the school sites, or where are you at on that?
So I don't know very much about the Aquatic Center. I'll be upfront about that. I haven't followed very much of that, just from my own, as a just general Paso community member. Um, I do know that our school sites are in need of upgrades. So I think it would depend on how much upgrades we need in our schools. I mean, you know, this goes back to we really need priorities clearly set out in our district on where our money goes. And I think um, it seems like we've been lacking that, right? Because these decisions should be fairly straightforward on where our money goes if we had lists of priorities on what goes where first. So, I mean, do we continue to fund the Aquatic Center because we've started spending money there? I don't know if that's the right decision if we have way more than that in upgrades to our existing schools. If they make the decision to shut down a school and that releases funds, I don't know. It's complicated. And yes, having a new aquatic center would be great, for extracurricular and for our, swimming students. Is it the right budgetary decision? It might be. I think it depends on the volume of additional improvements we still have to make to um, our existing infrastructure. We have to maintain what we've already got, though. I'm an advocate for maintaining what we've already committed to. So we'd have to look at the finances for that to make that decision. Yeah.
And just last question, just in general, I'm assuming in your job that you're used to working with groups of people. Um, and so what do you think is an ideal makeup for a board of directors at a school district as far as personality, skill sets, and then secondarily, how do you feel you fit into that mix?
I think the board of directors needs to be a good representation of the people it's supposed to be advocating for, right? So you we don't want a board that's all educators or all, um, we don't want to, we need some diversity of thought, and um, you want to be able to bring in different perspectives and ideas and come to be able to represent your community and your stakeholders, right? And here we're representing the students, we're representing the district, we're representing the taxpayers. There's a lot going on here. And I bring in a perspective that's not from education, but I can still represent where we're trying to take our students and our teachers and their input and drive us towards being stable financially and providing equitable education to all of our students. So that's where I fit in here. I'm bringing in a um, perspective from sort of the science and engineering side of things to be able to make rational decisions on how to spend money and how to represent our community and give students and teachers and staff voice here, and be able to fill a need that we haven't had, that's providing sort of this logical metrics based decision making.
Great. Uh, well, about out of time myself, so I wanted to say thank you for not only doing this, but as I always say, thank you for stepping up and running to try and be a part of the solution of it. It means a lot to me and the other board members at PREA when we have people who are willing to put themselves through this and to do the work, because it's a lot of people don't understand how much work being a board member is if you're going to do it well. Um, so is there anything else you would like to add? Is there a way that ways they can contact you if they have questions or for them to support you?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's caitlinvierra.com, and on there is a contact me page. It has my email address listed. You can message me there if you want a yard sign, find out more about my values and my platform, and there's a little bio there. So
Great. Well, thank you again, and we will talk to you soon.
great. Thank you so much.